In the beginning there was nothing. No light, no matter, no time itself. And then words. Not whispered, but spoken with such authority that existence itself had no choice but to comply. Let there be light, and light tore through the void like the first breath of a newborn universe. This is how the story begins, not with explanation, but with declaration, not with mechanism, but with meaning. Consider for a moment what it means to create through speech alone. We use words to describe, to label, to communicate what already exists. But here, at the foundation of everything, words preceded reality. The voice came first, and the cosmos followed. Day 1 brought light splitting from darkness. Day 2, the waters divided, some held above, some below, with breathable space between. Day 3 saw land emerge from seas, and with it, the first green things pushing through fresh soil. Day 4 placed lights in the heavens, sun to govern day, moon and stars to rule the night. Day 5 filled waters with swimming creatures and skies with wings. And on day 6, the earth brought forth living things of every kind. But the 6th day held something more, something unprecedented in this cascade of creative acts. The Creator, who had spoken galaxies into spinning and set the dance of molecules in motion, now paused. There was consultation, deliberation. Let us make humanity in our image, after our likeness, not merely another creature among creatures, but something that would bear the stamp of the divine itself. From the dust of the ground, the same elements that formed mountains and valleys, came the first human, Adam, the earthling, made from earth, yet infused with the breath of the Maker. This was not gradual development, not slow emergence from simpler forms, but instantaneous transformation. Dust became consciousness, matter met spirit, and humanity opened its eyes to a world that was, in every sense, brand new. The garden prepared for this first human was called Eden. Imagine a place where every need anticipated, every desire fulfilled before it fully formed. Rivers flowed from a single source, dividing to water the land with mineral-rich abundance. Trees grew with fruit that needed no cultivation, no anxious waiting through seasons. In the center stood 2 trees, distinct from all others, the tree of life, whose fruit promised endless existence, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, forbidden, its fruit carrying consequences too weighty for young humanity to bear. Here was paradise in its original sense, not merely pleasure, but purpose. The human was placed in the garden to work it and keep it. Even in perfection, there was meaning in stewardship, in tending, in participating with creation rather than simply consuming it. But humanity needed completion. Every creature passed before Adam in a great procession, land animals, birds of the air, each receiving its name. Names that somehow captured essence, that spoke identity into being. Yet among all these living things, no suitable companion emerged. No creature that could truly understand, truly respond, truly share the burden and beauty of conscious existence. And so another creative act, not from dust this time, but from the human's own side. Deep sleep descended, and when Adam woke, there stood another Eve, taken from his very substance, yet wholly herself. Bone of my bones, he declared, flesh of my flesh, the first poetry, the first wonder at another's presence. 2 humans now walked the garden paths, discovering together what it meant to be alive, to be aware, to be unashamed in complete vulnerability. The serpent came with questions. More cunning than any beast the Creator had made, it understood something profound about human nature, for we are most vulnerable to doubts disguised as wisdom. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? The misquotation was deliberate, the exaggeration strategic. Eve corrected the error. They They could eat from any tree except one, the tree in the garden's center. Touch it and die, they had been warned. But the serpent pressed further. You will not die. God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Here was the poison. Not an obvious lie, but a partial truth twisted into temptation. They would indeed gain knowledge. Their eyes would open to dimensions of reality previously hidden. But the cost, the terrible cost, was innocence itself. Eve looked at the fruit with new eyes. It appeared good for food, pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom. 3 appeals in one forbidden thing. She took and ate, and then, this detail matters, she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate too. No deception for Adam, no serpent's cunning words, just the fruit offered from familiar hands, and the choice to follow his companion into rebellion. The effect was immediate and irreversible. Knowledge flooded in, but it was knowledge of a particular kind. They saw their nakedness, felt shame where before there had been only innocent recognition. They heard the sound of the Creator walking in the garden in the cool of the day, a detail so intimate it aches, and they hid among the trees. As if the one who spoke worlds into being could somehow lose track of 2 humans among the leaves. Where are you? The question was not about location. It was about relationship, about the distance that had opened like a chasm in a single choice. The consequences rolled out with the inevitability of natural law. To the serpent, cursed above all creatures, condemned to crawl and eat dust, with enmity established between its offspring and the woman's. To Eve, pain in childbearing, desire for her husband paired with his rule over her. To Adam, cursed ground that would fight against cultivation, thorns and thistles instead of easy abundance, labor by the sweat of his face until returning to the dust from which he came, and over all of it, the terrible poetry of justice. Dust you are, and to dust you will return. They were driven from the garden, not in cruelty, but in mercy, for now the tree of life must be guarded, lest humans eat and live forever in this fallen state. Cherubim took their post at Eden's east gate, with a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way. Paradise was closed. The age of innocence had ended. The long story of redemption was about to begin. Outside Eden, life continued with new harshness. Eve bore children first, Cain, whose name meant acquired or forged, speaking to her hope that perhaps this son was the promised one who would crush the serpent. Then Abel, whose name meant breath or vapor, carrying already the whisper of transience. The brothers grew, developing their callings. Abel became a keeper of sheep, Cain a worker of the ground, each following paths that split humanity's labor between cultivating earth and tending animals. The day came when both brought offerings to the Creator. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock, the fat portions, the best of what he tended. Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil. The text is sparse about the difference, but the result was clear. Abel's offering was accepted, Cain's was not. Why? The story doesn't explain directly, but the pattern emerges. Abel gave the first and the best. Cain simply gave. One offering represented sacrifice, the other obligation. One came from worship, the other from duty. Cain's face fell. Anger settled over him like a shadow. And here the Creator did something remarkable. He warned him. Spoke directly to this angry farmer about the danger coiling at his door. Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. An image of predatory hunger, of something waiting for opportunity. A call to mastery, to self-control, to choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. But Cain did not master it. Instead, he invited his brother to the field. They were alone, away from any witnesses except the one who sees all. And there, Cain rose up against Abel and killed him. The first murder. Brother killing brother. Violence entering the world not from strangers, but from family. Blood soaking into ground that had never before drunk human life. Where is your brother, Abel? Again, the question was not about information. The all-knowing one was offering opportunity for confession, for repentance, but Cain chose defiance. I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? The very question condemned him. Yes, yes, we are our siblings' keepers. This is what it means to be human, to be family, to share the image of the divine. Cain's refusal to acknowledge responsibility was perhaps worse than the murder itself. The ground that drank Abel's blood now cried out against his murderer. The curse deepened. Cain would work the ground, but it would no longer yield its strength for him. He would be a restless wanderer on the earth, driven from the presence of the one he had defied. My punishment is more than I can bear, Cain cried. Even in judgment there was mercy, a mark placed on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him, protecting the murderer from vengeance even as he fled into exile. Generations passed. Adam and Eve had another son, Seth, whose name meant granted or appointed, a replacement for Abel, a new beginning after tragedy. Through Seth's line, humanity multiplied and spread, but with growth came corruption. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Giants walked the earth in those days, mighty men of old, men of renown, but their fame masked horror. Every inclination of human hearts became only evil all the time. Violence filled the earth like rising floodwater. The Creator grieved, not merely disappointment, but deep anguish. I regret that I have made them. Words that reveal something profound the divine heart can break. Love makes one vulnerable to sorrow, and so came the decision, a reset, a cleansing, a flood that would wipe the slate clean and start again with the one family that still walked in righteousness. Noah found favor in the eyes of the one who saw all. A righteous man, blameless among his generation, one who walked faithfully with his Creator in an age of corruption. The instruction came with stunning specificity. Build an ark, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 15 cubits high, approximately 450 feet by 75 feet by 45 feet, a vessel of staggering size. Make it of gopher wood, coat it with pitch inside and out. 3 decks, with rooms throughout, and a window near the top. The ship's dimensions reveal remarkable engineering, the same proportions used in modern cargo ships for optimal stability. For perhaps a century, Noah built while warning his generation of coming judgment. Can you imagine the mockery? Building a massive boat on dry land, proclaiming flood in a world that had perhaps never seen rain? But Noah persevered, and the ark took shape. When it was finished, the call went out. Gather the animals, 2 of every kind, 7 pairs of clean animals and birds. Load provisions for feeding this floating zoo. And then Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives entered the ark. 8 people, the remnant of humanity. On the appointed day, the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. Water came from below and above simultaneously. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain fell in torrents never before imagined. The waters rose 15 cubits above the highest mountains. Every living thing on dry land perished: birds, livestock, wild animals, creatures that move along the ground, and all humanity. Only Noah and those with him in the ark survived. For 150 days, the waters prevailed on the earth. The ark floated on the surface of global catastrophe, carrying its precious cargo through the dissolution of the world. Then the waters began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, Noah sent out a raven, which flew back and forth until the water dried up. He sent out a dove, but it found no place to set its foot and returned. 7 days later, he sent the dove again, and it returned with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. Life was returning. Another 7 days, and the dove did not come back. The earth was ready. Stepping from the ark onto renewed ground, Noah built an altar and sacrificed burnt offerings. The aroma pleased the Creator, who made a covenant never again to curse the ground because of humanity, never again to destroy all living creatures. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. A promise of cosmic stability, of reliable seasons, of a world that could be counted on despite human failure. The rainbow sealed the covenant. Whenever clouds gather and the bow appears, it stands as reminder not just to humanity, but to the Creator himself, of the promise never to flood the earth again. Every rainbow is memory and covenant displayed across the sky. From Noah's 3 sons came the repopulation of the earth. But unity did not last. Humanity migrated east and settled in the land of Shinar. They discovered brick-making and began to build, not scattered settlements, but a city, and in that city a tower reaching to the heavens. "Come, let us make a name for ourselves," they declared. "Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Here was rebellion disguised as achievement. The explicit command had been to fill the earth, to spread and multiply, but humanity wanted centralization, wanted reputation, wanted to storm heaven itself through engineering. The Creator came down to see the city and the tower, and his assessment was sobering. If, as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Not a compliment. A recognition of dangerous potential. United humanity, focused on self-glorification rather than divine purpose, could wreak havoc beyond imagination. And so came the confusion of languages. What had been unified speech fractured into mutually incomprehensible tongues. The construction halted. The people scattered across the earth, exactly as they had tried to prevent. The place was called Babel, for there the languages of all the earth were confused. Generations rolled forward through the genealogies. Shem to Arphaxad, to Shelah, to Eber, to Peleg, to Reu, to Serug, to Nahor, to Terah. And Terah became the father of Abram. Here the story shifts from universal history to particular calling. In Ur of the Chaldeans, in a land of moon-worshipping temples and sophisticated civilization, the call came to Abram. "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." No map, no guarantee of safety, just a destination unnamed and a series of promises. "I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And through you, all peoples on earth will be blessed." Abram went. At 75 years old, he left everything familiar and headed toward mystery. His wife Sarai accompanied him, along with his nephew Lot and all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran. They set out for the land of Canaan, and when they arrived, the promise was refined. "To your offspring I will give this land." But Abram and Sarai had no offspring. Years passed. The promise seemed to mock them as they aged without children. In their desperation, they took matters into their own hands. Sarai gave her Egyptian servant Hagar to Abram as a wife. Hagar conceived, and contempt grew between the women. Ishmael was, born not the promised child, but the child of human scheming. More years. Abram was 99 when the covenant was formalized. His name changed to Abraham, father of many nations. Sarai became Sarah, princess. The sign of the covenant would be circumcision, cutting away the foreskin as a mark in the flesh of every male. And the promise came again, more specific now. Sarah herself would bear a son. Sarah, who was 90 years old. Sarah, long past menopause, whose womb had been closed for decades. Abraham laughed. Sarah, listening at the tent entrance, laughed too. The idea was absurd, biologically impossible, but the question came back, piercing through doubt. Is anything too hard for the Creator? The promise came to pass with the precision of spring following winter. Sarah, at 90 years old, conceived and bore a son. They named him Isaac, he laughs, because laughter had marked his announcement and would mark his arrival. The impossible child, the son of promise, born to parents who should have been great-grandparents. Here was proof that the Creator's timeline operates on scales entirely different from human expectation. But the test was coming. Isaac grew from infant to boy, and then came the command that still echoes through history with horror and wonder intertwined. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Consider what this meant. Everything the promise of descendants as numerous as stars, the blessing to all nations, the impossible miracle of Isaac's birth, all of it now apparently required the death of the very child through whom it was supposed to come. It made no sense. It contradicted everything Abraham understood about the Creator's character and promises. Yet early the next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey, cut wood for the burnt offering, and took Isaac and 2 servants toward the place appointed. 3 days they travelled. 3 days of walking toward the unthinkable, with the sun beside him asking innocent questions, with the wood for his own sacrifice strapped to the pack animal. On the 3rd day, Abraham saw the place in the distance. He told the servants to wait. We will worship, and then we will come back to you, both of us. Even in the midst of this dark obedience, faith spoke in plural. They climbed the mountain together, Isaac carrying the wood for his own sacrifice. Father? The question came with the trust of a child who has never known betrayal. The fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham's answer carried layers of meaning he might not have fully grasped himself. God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Prophecy and desperate hope wrapped in one sentence. At the place appointed, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood. Then came the moment that defies imagination. He bound Isaac his son, his only son, the child of promise, and laid him on the altar atop the wood. The boy did not struggle. Perhaps he trusted too much, or perhaps he understood this was something beyond resistance. Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Abraham! Abraham! The voice came from heaven, urgent, stopping the blade mid-arc. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket was a ram caught by its horns. The provision had been there all along, waiting for this moment. He sacrificed the ram instead of his son, and named the place, "The Lord will provide," and the angel called again from heaven, reaffirming the covenant with new intensity. Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Isaac married Rebekah, and she bore twin sons who struggled together even in the womb. Esau emerged first, red and hairy. Jacob came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel supplanter, Deceiver, the name written into his character before he could speak. The twins grew with opposing natures. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field. Jacob was quiet, dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau. Rebekah loved Jacob. The birthright was sold for a bowl of stew. Esau's hunger in the moment outweighing his inheritance. The blessing was stolen through deception, Jacob wearing goatskins to simulate his brother's hairiness, while his father's eyes had grown too dim to see the truth. When Esau discovered the theft, his cry echoed with the anguish of irreversible loss. "Bless me, me too, my father." But the blessing, once given, could not be recalled. Jacob fled north to Haran, running from his brother's murderous rage. On the journey, sleeping with a stone for a pillow, he dreamed of a stairway reaching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending on it. At the top stood the Creator, renewing the covenant yet again. "I am with you, and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land." In Haran, Jacob met his match in manipulation. His uncle Laban promised him Rachel, the younger daughter, in exchange for 7 years of labor. The years seemed like only a few days to Jacob because of his love for her, but on the wedding night, Laban substituted Leah, the older daughter. Jacob woke beside the wrong sister, deceived by the deceiver, tasting his own medicine. He worked another 7 years for Rachel, and from these 2 sisters and their servants came 12 sons who would become the tribes of Israel. The return to Canaan came after 20 years. Jacob had prospered despite Laban's repeated attempts to cheat him. He had wives, children, flocks, and herds. But Esau still waited ahead, and messengers reported he was coming to meet Jacob with 400 men. Terror gripped the deceiver as he faced the consequence of his theft decades earlier. The night before the meeting, Jacob sent his family across the ford of the Jabbok River. He remained alone on the other side, and there a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Think about this image. All night, in darkness, 2 figures grappling in mortal contest. The stranger struck Jacob's hip socket, wrenching it from its place, but still Jacob held on. As dawn approached, the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob responded with words that reveal transformation. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." No more scheming for blessings, no more deception. Just desperate, clinging to the divine presence, refusing to release until blessing comes. The question came, "What is your name?" And for the first time, perhaps Jacob spoke his own identity without shame or disguise. Jacob, deceiver, supplanter, I am who I am. Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and have overcome. A new identity forged in the furnace of wrestling. Israel limped away from that encounter as the sun rose, bearing a permanent injury that marked divine encounter. He had seen God face to face, and his life was preserved. The reunion with Esau carried grace where vengeance was expected. The brothers embraced and wept. Forgiveness flowed where blood could have been spilled. The family moved on, and from Jacob's 12 sons came the beginnings of a nation. But the path to that nation led through Egypt. Joseph, Jacob's favorite son, the dreamer of grandiose visions, was sold by his jealous brothers into slavery. The caravan carried him south to Egypt, where through prison and providence he rose to become second in command of the entire empire. When famine struck the region, it was Joseph's stored grain that saved lives, including the lives of the brothers who betrayed him. The family relocated to Egypt during the famine, and there they prospered for generations. 70 people entered Egypt, but then came a Pharaoh who did not remember Joseph, and the descendants of Abraham had multiplied to hundreds of thousands. Fear gripped the Egyptian throne. These foreigners might ally with enemies, might overwhelm Egyptian culture, and so the oppression began. Slavery, brutal labor in brick kilns and construction sites, taskmasters with whips driving Hebrew workers to build Pharaoh's store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. When the people continued to multiply despite the oppression, Pharaoh issued a genocidal decree. Every Hebrew boy born must be thrown into the Nile River. It was into this context of infanticide and desperation that Moses was born. His mother, defying Pharaoh's command, hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she made a basket of papyrus reeds, coated it with pitch and tar to make it waterproof, placed her baby inside, and set it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister Miriam watched from a distance to see what would happen. Picture this scene: a Hebrew infant floating in a waterproofed basket in the very river where Pharaoh had ordered all Hebrew boys to be thrown. Crocodiles lurked in these waters. The current could carry the basket away. Any number of disasters could have occurred, but it was Pharaoh's daughter who came down to the river to bathe, and she saw the basket among the reeds. She sent her slave girl to get it, and when she opened it, the baby cried. Compassion stirred in the princess's heart. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. And then Miriam, bold beyond her years, stepped forward with a suggestion. "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" The princess agreed, and Miriam fetched their own mother. Pharaoh's daughter paid Moses' mother to nurse her own son. Raised in Pharaoh's palace, educated in all the wisdom of Egypt, a Hebrew prince in the empire that enslaved his people, Moses grew to adulthood with a foot in both worlds, Hebrew by birth, Egyptian by education. One day, watching Hebrew slaves at forced labor, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. Moses looked this way and that, saw no one watching, and killed the Egyptian, hiding the body in the sand. The next day, intervening in a fight between 2 Hebrews, he discovered his secret was known. "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Fear seized Moses. If the slaves knew, Pharaoh would soon know. He fled east into the desert of Midian, leaving behind privilege and power to become a fugitive shepherd. For 40 years he tended his father-in-law's flocks in the wilderness, a prince reduced to pastoralism, an Egyptian-trained Hebrew watching sheep in the desert. Then came the day that split history. Tending the flock near Horeb, the mountain of God, Moses saw a bush burning but not consumed by the flames. He turned aside to investigate this strange sight, and a voice called from the fire, "Moses! Moses! Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Moses hid his face, afraid to look at God, and the declaration came that would reshape the destiny of nations. "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people the Israelites out of Egypt." Moses' objections came in rapid succession. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh? What if they ask your name? What if they do not believe me? I am slow of speech and tongue. Please send someone else." Every excuse imaginable poured from the reluctant prophet, but the answers came with equal force. "I will be with you. Tell them, I am has sent you. Here are miraculous signs to perform. Your brother Aaron will speak for you. You are going." Moses returned to Egypt after 40 years of exile, now 80 years old, accompanied by Aaron. They gathered the elders of Israel and performed the signs. The people believed and bowed down in worship, but Pharaoh was another matter entirely. "Who is this I am that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know this God, and I will not let Israel go." The confrontation escalated. Pharaoh increased the Israelites' burden, forcing them to gather their own straw while maintaining the same quota of bricks. The people turned against Moses, and Moses cried out to God. The response was clear. "You will see what I will do to Pharaoh. With a mighty hand he will let them go. With a mighty hand he will drive them out of his country. The plagues came in waves, each targeting an Egyptian deity, demonstrating the creator's supremacy over the pantheon of the empire. The Nile, source of life, worshipped as a god, turned to blood. The fish died, the river stank, and Egyptians dug along the banks for drinking water. After 7 days, the second plague arrived. Frogs came up from the Nile in such numbers that they invaded houses, bedrooms, beds, ovens, and kneading troughs. When they died at Moses' prayer, they were piled in heaps, and the land reeked with their rotting bodies. Their gnats swarmed from the dust itself, covering man and beast. The Egyptian magicians tried to duplicate this plague, but could not. "This is the finger of God," they admitted, but Pharaoh's heart remained hard. Swarms of flies filled Egyptian homes, while the region of Goshen where the Israelites lived remained untouched. A plague struck the livestock. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats died by the thousands. Egyptian animals perished while Israelite herds remained healthy. Boils broke out on Egyptians and their animals, festering sores so painful that the magicians could not stand before Moses. Hail fell from the sky with a fury Egypt had never seen, mixed with fire flashing down to the ground. It struck down everything in the fields, people, animals, and plants, breaking every tree. Only in Goshen did no hail fall. Locusts came on an east wind, covering the ground until it was black, devouring everything the hail had left. Pharaoh's officials begged him to let the Israelites go before Egypt was completely ruined. But after each plague, when relief came, Pharaoh hardened his heart again. Then came the 9th plague, darkness. Not the darkness of night, but a darkness that could be felt. A thick darkness that covered all Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another or leave their places. Yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they lived. The plague attacked Ra himself, the sun god, supreme deity of Egypt. For 3 days, Egypt's god did not shine. Pharaoh called Moses. "Go, worship your God. Even your women and children may go with you. Only leave your flocks and herds behind." But Moses refused. "You must allow us to have sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to our God. Our livestock too must go with us. Not a hoof is to be left behind." Pharaoh's rage exploded. "Get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die." Moses agreed. "Just as you say. I will never appear before you again." But before leaving, he delivered the final warning. One more plague was coming, more terrible than all that had preceded it. At midnight, the Creator would pass through Egypt. Every firstborn son would die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the slave girl at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There would be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there had ever been or ever would be again. The instructions for the Israelites were precise. On the 10th day of the month, each family was to select a lamb-year-old male without defect. On the 14th day, at twilight, all the people would slaughter their lambs. They were to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the doorframes of their houses. That night they would roast the meat and eat it with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. They were to eat it with their cloaks tucked into their belts, sandals on their feet, staffs in their hands, ready to leave at a moment's notice. This was the Passover. When the Creator saw the blood on the doorframe, he would pass over that house and not permit the destroyer to enter and strike down the firstborn. This night was to become a lasting ordinance, remembered and celebrated throughout all generations. Midnight came. The destroyer passed through Egypt. In every house without blood on the doorframe, the firstborn died. From Pharaoh's palace to the dungeon where captives sat, from the greatest house to the humblest dwelling, death visited every Egyptian family. There was no household without someone dead. The wailing rose like a chorus of agony across the entire nation. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron during the night. Up! Leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship your God as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds and go, and also bless me." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, "we will all die." The Israelites left Egypt after 430 years, not as fugitives but as a nation, 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. They plundered Egypt, taking articles of silver and gold and clothing. The Egyptians gave them whatever they asked, so glad were they to see them leave. A mixed multitude left with them, along with large droves of livestock. They travelled toward the Red Sea, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But behind them, Pharaoh's heart hardened once more. "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services." He mustered his army 600 of his best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, each with officers. The thunder of hooves and wheels pursued the freed slaves toward the sea. When the Israelites saw the Egyptian army approaching, terror seized them. The sea blocked their path ahead, mountains hemmed them in on both sides, and death raced toward them from behind. They cried out in fear and anger. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt?" Moses' answer rang with confidence, born of divine promise. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Creator will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then came the command. "Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground." The angel of God moved from in front of Israel's army and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. It brought darkness to the Egyptians but gave light to Israel. Throughout the night, neither army came near the other. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Creator drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters divided. Think about what this means. Water fluid, formless, always seeking the lowest level, stood up like walls on either side. The Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on their right and their left. The Egyptians pursued. Every horse and chariot and horseman followed into the midst of the sea. In the morning watch, chaos struck the Egyptian army. Chariot wheels came off, making driving difficult. "Let's get away from the Israelites," the Egyptians cried. "The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Too late. The command came to Moses. "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." At daybreak, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the water flowed back. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Creator swept them into the sea. The water covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. On the far shore, standing on dry ground while corpses and wreckage washed up at their feet, the Israelites saw the great power the Creator had displayed against Egypt. They feared him and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. Miriam took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her, with timbrels and dancing, and they sang the song of deliverance, the hymn of impossible rescue, the anthem of a nation born in one night through water and blood. Freedom tastes sweet for 3 days. Then comes thirst. The Israelites travelled into the desert of Shur, finding no water. When they reached Marah, water was there but bitter, undrinkable. The people grumbled against Moses. "What are we to drink?" Moses cried out to the Creator, who showed him a piece of wood. When Moses threw it into the water became sweet, a miracle to quench thirst and a test to reveal character. They came to Elim, where 12 springs and 70 palm trees provided respite. Then into the desert of Sin, where hunger replaced thirst as the complaint, "If only we had died by the Creator's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Memory is selective in hardship. The slaves who had groaned under Egyptian whips now remembered slavery as abundance. The answer came at twilight. Quail covered the camp, so many that gathering them required no hunting, and in the morning thin flakes appeared on the desert floor like frost covering the ground. "What is it?" The people asked. "Man-hu" in Hebrew, which became manna, bread from heaven. Each morning it appeared with the dew, and each person gathered what they needed. Those who gathered much did not have too much, and those who gathered little did not have too little. It melted when the sun grew hot, so it had to be gathered early. On the 6th day they gathered twice as much, for the 7th day was Sabbath rest, and miraculously what spoiled after one day remained fresh over the Sabbath. For 40 years this manna fell. Imagine it, 14,600 mornings of divine provision, an entire generation who never knew hunger, who woke each day to find their breakfast waiting on the ground, who learned to trust in daily bread that could not be hoarded or stored beyond its appointed time. 3 months after leaving Egypt, they reached the desert of Sinai and camped at the base of the mountain. Moses climbed to meet with God, and the message came for the people. "You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." The people answered in unison, "We will do everything the Lord has said." But they had no idea what they were promising. Moses returned to the mountain, and the instructions came for preparation. The people must consecrate themselves, wash their clothes, abstain from intimacy. On the 3rd day, the Creator would descend on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. The 3rd morning arrived with thunder and lightning. A thick cloud covered the mountain. The sound of a trumpet grew louder and louder. The whole mountain trembled violently. Smoke billowed from it like a furnace, because the Creator descended on it in fire. When the trumpet sounded long and loud, Moses spoke, and God answered him with thunder. Picture this moment: an entire nation standing at the base of a mountain that burned with fire reaching to the heart of heaven. Smoke, lightning, earthquakes, trumpet blasts that grew impossibly louder instead of fading. The people trembled with fear and stayed at a distance. "Speak to us yourself and we will listen," they said to Moses, "but do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses climbed into the thick darkness where God was, and there received the law. First, the 10 Commandments, carved not by human hand but by the finger of God into stone tablets. "No other gods before me, no carved images. Do not misuse the name. Remember the Sabbath. Honor father and mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony. Do not covet." Then came the detailed regulations. Laws about servants, about violence and restitution, about property and justice, about festivals and offerings. Instructions for building the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary where the divine presence would dwell among the people. Precise measurements for the ark that would hold the tablets of the covenant, for the table that would hold the bread of presence, for the lampstand of pure gold, for the altar of burnt offering, for the courtyard that would surround it all. Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, and in his absence the people grew restless. They gathered around Aaron. "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him." Aaron's capitulation was swift and complete. "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me." They did, and Aaron fashioned them into an idol cast in the shape of a calf. "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." He built an altar before it and announced a festival. The next day the people rose early, sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Then they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. On the mountain the Creator informed Moses of what was happening below. "Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf." The divine anger burned. "Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." But Moses interceded. He reminded God of his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He appealed to God's reputation among the Egyptians, and the Creator relented from the disaster he had threatened. Moses turned and went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the covenant in his hands, tablets inscribed on both sides by the finger of God. As Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned. He threw the tablets down, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf, burned it in fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. They were forced to consume their sin, to internalize the idol they had worshipped. Then Moses stood at the entrance to the camp and called out, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." All the Levites rallied to him, and the command came, terrible in its justice. "Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor. This is the Golden Calf Massacre, one of your key dramatic moments." The Levites did as commanded. 3,000 fell that day by the sword of their own kinsmen. Blood ran through the camp, mixing with the dust and the remnants of golden powder dissolved in water. It was brutal. It was decisive. And it established the Levites as the priestly tribe, set apart for divine service through their willingness to execute judgment even against their own families. Moses returned to the mountain to intercede again, offering himself as atonement. "But now, please forgive their sin, but if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." The Creator's response revealed both judgment and mercy. Those who had sinned would be punished, but the journey would continue. Moses would lead them, though the divine presence itself was too holy to travel in their midst, lest they be consumed. The tabernacle was constructed according to the precise specifications given on the mountain. When it was completed, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter because the cloud had settled on it and the glory was overwhelming. This cloud would guide them through all their travels. When it lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out, and where it settled, they would camp. The visible presence of the divine moved with them, a constant reminder that they did not journey alone. At Sinai, the people were organized for war and worship. A census was taken of all men 20 years old or more who could serve in the army. 603,550 fighting men, plus the Levites who were exempt from military service because they were dedicated to the tabernacle. The 12 tribes were arranged around the tabernacle in specific positions, each with its standard and leader. When they moved in formation. When they camped in order. What had been a rabble of fleeing slaves was becoming a nation with structure and purpose. Then came the moment to move toward the promised land. The cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, and the Israelites set out from the desert of Sinai. But the complaints resumed almost immediately. The rabble among them began to crave other food, and the Israelites started wailing. "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." Moses felt crushed by the burden of leadership. Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms, as a nurse carries an infant, to the land you promised on oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? His desperation was raw, unfiltered. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. The Creator's response was to distribute the burden. 70 elders were chosen to share the responsibility of leadership, and for the meat the people craved, quail would come not for a day or two, but for a whole month, until it came out of their nostrils and they loathed it. A wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea. They fell all around the camp to a depth of about 3 feet on the ground. All that day and night and all the next day, the people went out and gathered them. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it could be consumed, the Lord's anger burned against them, and he struck them with a severe plague. The place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, Graves of Craving, because there they buried the people who had craved other food. From Kibroth Hattaavah they travelled to Hazeroth, where Miriam and Aaron began to oppose Moses. They questioned his authority, challenged his unique relationship with God. The Creator's response was immediate. He summoned all 3 to the tent of meeting, descended in a pillar of cloud, and stood at the entrance. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions, I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? When the cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin had turned leprous, as white as snow. Aaron begged Moses for forgiveness, and Moses cried out for her healing. She was healed but confined outside the camp for 7 days, bearing the shame of her rebellion before being restored. Finally they reached Kadesh Barnea, on the border of the Promised Land. Moses sent 12 spies to explore Canaan, 1 leader from each tribe. For 40 days they scouted the land, and when they returned, they brought back a single cluster of grapes so large it required 2 men to carry it on a pole between them. The land did flow with milk and honey, as promised, but the people living there were powerful, and the cities were fortified and very large. Giants lived there, the descendants of Anak. 10 of the spies gave a discouraging report. We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Only 2 spies disagreed, Joshua and Caleb. Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the people refused to listen. That night, all the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron. "If only we had died in Egypt, or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land, only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" They even talked about choosing a new leader to take them back to slavery. The judgment was swift and proportionate. The Creator declared that not one person of that generation would enter the Promised Land. For 40 years they would wander in the wilderness. 1 year for each day the spies had explored the land. The 10 spies who spread the bad report died of a plague before the Lord. Only Joshua and Caleb, who had maintained faith, would live to enter the land with the next generation. The people mourned when they heard this verdict, and in the morning they decided to go up toward the highest point in the hill country. "We have sinned," they said. "We will go up to the place the Lord promised." But Moses warned them, "Why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This will not succeed. Do not go up, because the Lord is not with you." You will be defeated by your enemies." They went anyway, presuming to fight without divine presence. The Amalekites and Canaanites living in the hill country came down and attacked them, beating them down all the way to Hormah. Disobedience in both directions, first refusing to go when commanded, then going when warned not to, brought the same result: defeat. The wilderness years stretched ahead. 40 years of wandering, of circling, of an entire generation dying in the desert they had refused to cross. During this time, rebellions continued. Korah, a Levite, led a revolt against Moses and Aaron, gathering 250 leaders of the community. "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" The earth itself answered the challenge. The ground split apart beneath Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. They went down alive into the realm of the dead, with their households and all their possessions. The earth closed over them, and they perished. Fire came from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering incense. The censers were hammered into sheets to overlay the altar, as a reminder that no one except a descendant of Aaron should come to burn incense before the Lord. Even Moses and Aaron failed at the end. At Meribah, when the people quarreled again about water, God told Moses to speak to the rock and it would pour out water. But Moses, frustrated by 40 years of complaints, struck the rock twice with his staff instead. Water gushed out, but the judgment came. "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." Aaron died on Mount Hor, and his son Eleazar received the high priestly garments. Moses would only see the promised land from a distance before his own death. The generation that left Egypt would not enter the land, but their children would. Near the end of the 40 years, the people travelled around Edom and grew impatient on the way. They spoke against God and against Moses. "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread, there is no water, and we detest this miserable food." Notice the progression. What was once manna from heaven had become miserable food through constant complaint. The judgment was immediate. Venomous snakes came among them, biting the people, and many died. When the people confessed their sin, the Creator told Moses to make a bronze snake and put it on a pole. Anyone who was bitten could look at it and live. Faith exercised through looking brought healing. Those who refused to look died. Victories began to accumulate as the new generation came of age. They defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, taking possession of land east of the Jordan. The journey was nearing its end. Moses stood on Mount Nebo and looked across at the promised land spread before him. "I have let you see it with your eyes," the Creator said, "but you will not cross over into it." Moses died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. He was buried in a valley in Moab, but to this day no one knows where his grave is. He was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. But Joshua son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him. The Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. The baton of leadership passed to a new generation. It was time to cross the Jordan and take the land. The Lord spoke to Joshua, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous." Joshua sent 2 spies into Jericho. They stayed at the house of Rahab the prostitute. When the king of Jericho sent word demanding she turn them over, she hid them under stalks of flax on her roof. and sent the pursuers in the wrong direction. She then made a request. "I know that the Lord has given you this land. Please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you," the spies promised. When Jericho fell, she and her household would be spared. The crossing of the Jordan came at harvest time, when the river was at flood stage, overflowing its banks. The priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of the people. As soon as their feet touched the water's edge, the water flowing downstream stopped. It piled up in a heap a great distance away, while the water flowing to the Dead Sea was completely cut off. The priests stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing. Does this remind you of another water crossing? Another impossible moment when fluid obeyed command and stood up like walls? History was echoing itself. A new generation, a new leader, but the same miraculous provision. When the priests came up out of the river carrying the ark, and their feet touched dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed their banks as before. They camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. That night they celebrated Passover, and the very next day the manna stopped. After 40 years of daily provision, the bread from heaven ceased. They ate the produce of Canaan unleavened bread and roasted grain. The supernatural sustenance gave way to natural provision. They were in the land now, and the land would feed them. Jericho stood before them, tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out, no one came in. The instructions for its conquest defied military logic. March around the city once a day for 6 days, with 7 priests carrying trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When they give a long blast on the trumpets and the people give a loud shout, the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. Consider the absurdity from a military standpoint. No battering rams, no siege towers, no undermining of foundations, just walking in circles while blowing horns. Yet Joshua commanded, and the people obeyed. For 6 days they marched in silence around Jericho's massive walls. The defenders on the walls must have watched in bewilderment. What kind of siege was this? The 7th day came, 7 times around the city. On the 7th circuit, when the priests sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." The trumpets sounded. The people shouted. And Jericho's walls, those massive fortifications that had stood for generations, collapsed. Not undermined by sappers, not breached by rams, but fallen at a shout. The army charged straight in, and Jericho fell. Only Rahab and her household were spared. The prostitute who had shown faith became part of Israel's story, grafted into the covenant people. The silver, gold, bronze, and iron from the city went into the Lord's treasury. Everything else was destroyed, and Joshua pronounced a curse on anyone who would rebuild Jericho. But victory bred over confidence. The next target was Ai, a small city. Joshua sent only about 3,000 men, thinking the inhabitants few. They were routed, and 36 Israelites died. The hearts of the people melted in fear. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down before the ark until evening, along with the elders of Israel. "Why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us?" The answer came with stark clarity. "Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. Someone had kept plunder from Jericho. The sin of one had brought defeat to all. Through casting lots, the guilty party was identified. Achan, son of Carmi, had taken a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels. He had hidden them in the ground inside his tent, burying his sin beneath dirt, But hidden sin still corrupts. Achan, his entire family, and all his possessions were taken to the valley of Achor. They were stoned and burned. All Israel stoned them, and after they had stoned them, they burned them. With sin purged from the camp, Ai fell in the second attempt. Joshua used an ambush, drawing the defenders out of the city while a hidden force entered and set it ablaze. The conquest of Canaan had truly begun. The reputation of Israel spread through the land. When the Gibeonites heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to deception. They dressed in worn-out clothes and sandals, carried cracked wineskins and dry, mouldy bread, and claimed to come from a distant country. "We have heard reports of the Lord your God and all that he did in Egypt. Make a treaty with us." Joshua and the leaders made a treaty without inquiring of the Lord. 3 days later they discovered the Gibeonites were their neighbors. When 5 Amorite kings heard that Gibeon had made peace with Israel, they joined forces to attack Gibeon. The Gibeonites sent word to Joshua, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us." Joshua marched all night from Gilgal with his entire army. The Lord threw the Amorite armies into confusion, and Israel pursued them. During the chase, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them from the sky, killing more with hail than Israel killed with the sword. Then came one of your key dramatic moments, the sun standing still over Gibeon. Joshua spoke to the Lord in the presence of Israel. "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Aijalon." And they did. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, when the Lord listened to a human being. Time itself bent to accommodate divine purpose, extending daylight for complete victory. The 5 kings hid in a cave at Makkedah. Joshua had them brought out and executed, their bodies hung on 5 trees until evening. The southern campaign continued, city after city falling. Then the northern coalition formed under Jabin, king of Hazor, bringing together kings from the mountains, the Arabah, the western foothills, and all the regions around. Their combined forces were like the sand on the seashore in number, along with horses and chariots in great numbers. The Lord told Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them, slain, over to Israel." Joshua and his whole army came against them suddenly at the waters of Merom and attacked. The Lord gave them into the hand of Israel, who defeated them and pursued them. Not one survived. The land was subdued. 31 kings in all had fallen. Joshua apportioned the land among the 12 tribes, each receiving its inheritance. The tabernacle was set up at Shiloh, providing a central place of worship. After years of warfare, Joshua addressed the people one final time before his death. "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." The people responded with declarations of loyalty. Joshua set up a large stone under the oak near the holy place of the Lord as a witness. Then Joshua died at the age of 110 years. The generation that had seen the Lord's great work served faithfully. But after them came a generation who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. The age of the judges was about to begin, and with it, centuries of cyclical rebellion and deliverance. The pattern emerged with depressing regularity. Israel would abandon the Lord and serve the Baals and the Ashtoreth's fertility gods of the Canaanites, who promised abundant crops and numerous children. The Lord's anger would burn against them, and he would sell them into the hands of their enemies. When the people groaned under oppression and cried out for deliverance, the Lord would raise up a judge to save them. Under the judge there would be peace. Then the judge would die, and the cycle would begin again. Each generation sank deeper into corruption than the one before. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, names that flash briefly across the historical record, each delivering Israel from different oppressors. But the story that captures the era's character begins with Deborah, a prophetess who held court under a palm tree in the hill country of Ephraim. She was judging Israel at a time when Jabin, a Canaanite king, had cruelly oppressed them for 20 years. His commander, Sisera, had 900 chariots fitted with iron, a technological advantage that made him nearly invincible. Deborah summoned Barak son of Abinoam. "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." Barak's response revealed the fragility of courage in that age. "If you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." Deborah agreed to accompany him, but warned, "Because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." The battle unfolded as prophesied. The Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots before Barak's army. Sisera abandoned his chariot and fled on foot to the tent of Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. She welcomed him, gave him milk to drink, and covered him with a blanket. Exhausted from battle, he fell asleep. While he slept, Jael took a tent peg and a hammer, crept quietly to him, and drove the peg through his temple into the ground. When Barak arrived in pursuit, Jael showed him Sisera lying dead with the tent peg through his temple. The mighty commander, who had terrorized Israel with his iron chariots, died at the hands of a woman wielding household tools. Deborah and Barak sang a victory song celebrating the triumph, but 40 years of peace followed, and then the Israelites again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. This time the Midianites oppressed them so severely that the Israelites made shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. Whenever Israel planted crops, the Midianites and other eastern peoples invaded, camping on the land and ruining the crops all the way to Gaza. They left no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and tents like swarms of locusts impossible to count, and their camels. Israel was impoverished by Midian, and the people cried out to the Lord. The angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon while he was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. Think about this image: a man reduced to hiding in a winepress, a place meant for grapes, to thresh grain. The oppression had driven them underground, forced them into spaces never designed for harvest. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior," the angel declared. Gideon's response dripped with skepticism. "Pardon me, my lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand." "Am I not sending you?" Gideon protested. His clan was the weakest in Manasseh, and he was the least in his family. But the promise came, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Gideon asked for a sign. He prepared a young goat and unleavened bread, placing the meat and bread on a rock. The angel touched them with the tip of his staff, and fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and bread. Then the angel vanished. Gideon realized he had seen the angel of the Lord face to face and feared he would die. But the Lord assured him, "Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die." That night, Gideon received his first assignment: tear down his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Build a proper altar to the Lord and sacrifice a bull using the wood from the Asherah pole. Gideon obeyed, but he did it at night because he was afraid of his family and the townsmen. When the people discovered what had been done, they demanded Gideon's death, but his father Joash defended him. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. From that day on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal. Let Baal contend with him, because he broke down Baal's altar. The Midianites and their allies gathered for war, crossing the Jordan and camping in the valley of Jezreel. The Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, calling them to arms. 32,000 men assembled, but Gideon still harbored doubt. He asked for another sign, the famous fleece test. He would place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If in the morning the fleece was wet with dew while the ground was dry, he would know God would save Israel by his hand. It happened exactly as requested. The next night, Gideon asked for the reverse dry fleece, wet ground. Again, it happened as he asked. God accommodated the weakness of his chosen deliverer, providing confirmation upon confirmation. Then came one of the most counterintuitive military strategies in history. The Lord told Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me." Gideon was instructed to announce, "Anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." 22,000 men left. 10,000 remained. Still too many. The Lord said, "Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there." At the water, most men knelt down to drink, putting their mouths directly to the water, but 300 lapped with their hands to their mouths, staying alert even while drinking. With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands, the Lord declared. Let all the others go home. 300 men against an army that covered the valley like locusts. The odds were impossible by design. That night, the Lord told Gideon, "Get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands." But recognizing Gideon's lingering fear, he added, "If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack." Gideon and Purah crept to the outposts of the camp. A man was telling his friend a dream. "I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed." His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." Hearing this, Gideon worshipped. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." He divided the 300 men into 3 companies. He placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside the jars. "Watch me," he told them. "Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" They reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after the changing of the guard. The 3 companies blew their trumpets and smashed their jars. Grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow, they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. The confusion was total. The Lord caused the Midianites to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled, and Israel pursued them. What had seemed like an overwhelming force dissolved into panic and self-destruction. Victory came not through military might, but through faith expressed in obedient absurdity, breaking jars and blowing trumpets in the darkness. The era of judges continued through cycles of deliverance and decline. Jephthah made a rash vow and sacrificed his own daughter in fulfillment of it. Then came Samson, whose story reads like tragedy wrapped in supernatural strength. Before his birth, an angel appeared to his mother, a barren woman. You will become pregnant and have a son. No razor may be used on his head, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Samson grew, and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahane Dan. His strength was legendary. He killed a lion with his bare hands. He caught 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail in pairs, fastened a torch to every pair of tails, and sent them into the Philistine grain fields, burning up the shocks and standing grain. When the Philistines confronted him with 1,000 men, he picked up a fresh jawbone of a donkey and struck down 1,000 men with it. But Samson's weakness was equally legendary. He fell in love with Delilah, a woman from the valley of Sorek. The Philistine rulers approached her. "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength, and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." 3 times Delilah asked, and 3 times Samson lied about the source of his strength. Each time she tested him, and each time he broke free easily. Finally, she nagged him day after day until he was sick to death of it. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he admitted, "because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." Delilah lulled him to sleep on her lap and called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. His strength left him. When he woke, he thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again. The Philistine rulers gathered for a great sacrifice to their god Dagon, celebrating the capture of their enemy. "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands." In their revelry, they called for Samson to entertain them. He was brought from prison and made to perform before 3,000 men and women on the roof and in the temple. Samson said to the servant holding his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Then he prayed, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." He reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, braced himself against them, one on his right, one on his left, and pushed with all his might. "Let me die with the Philistines," he shouted. Down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. The book of Judges closes with a refrain repeated throughout. In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. Anarchy and apostasy characterized the era. The need for centralized leadership had become desperate. The people cried out for a king. Samuel, the last judge, and a prophet, arose to lead Israel back toward faithfulness. Born to Hannah after years of barrenness and fervent prayer, Samuel was dedicated to the Lord's service from childhood. As a boy serving in the tabernacle under Eli the priest, he heard the Lord's voice calling him by name in the night. The word of the Lord was rare in those days, but Samuel became known throughout Israel as a prophet. When he spoke, none of his words fell to the ground unfulfilled. But the people's demand for a king grieved Samuel. They wanted to be like the other nations, with a visible monarch rather than the invisible reign of the Lord. "Give us a king to lead us," the elders demanded. Samuel warned them of what a king would do: conscript their sons for his chariots and cavalry, make them plough his ground and reap his harvest, take their daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers, seize the best of their fields and vineyards and olive groves, take 1/10 of their grain and vintage, and take their servants and cattle for his own use. The people refused to listen. "We want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." The Lord told Samuel, Listen to them and give them a king." Saul, son of Kish, stood head and shoulders above everyone else, impressive, handsome, from the tribe of Benjamin. Samuel anointed him privately, and then publicly, by lot before all Israel. Saul led victories against the Ammonites, and the kingdom was reaffirmed at Gilgal. But cracks appeared quickly in Saul's character. Facing the Philistines at Gilgal, Saul grew impatient, waiting for Samuel to arrive and offer the burnt offering. He presumed to offer it himself, usurping the priestly role. Samuel arrived just as Saul finished. "You have done a foolish thing," Samuel declared. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people." Saul's second fatal error came after a military campaign against the Amalekites. The Lord had commanded complete destruction, spare nothing. But Saul and his army spared Agag the king, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs. When Samuel confronted him, Saul claimed the animals were spared for sacrifice. Samuel's response has echoed through history. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." Samuel turned to leave, but Saul caught hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you." Then Samuel put Agag to death before the Lord at Gilgal. Samuel never went to see Saul again until the day of his death, but he mourned for him. The Lord sent Samuel to Bethlehem, to the house of Jesse. "I have chosen one of his sons to be king." Jesse paraded 7 sons before Samuel, each impressive in his own way. But the Lord rejected them all. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Samuel asked if there were any more sons. "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered, "but he is tending the sheep." David came from the fields, ruddy and handsome. "Rise and anoint him," the Lord said. "This is the one." From that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. But the Spirit departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. His servants suggested finding someone to play the lyre to soothe him. Someone recommended David a son of Jesse who knew how to play the lyre, a brave man and a warrior who spoke well and was fine-looking, and the Lord was with him. David entered Saul's service, unaware that he had been anointed to replace the king he was serving. When the evil spirit came on Saul, David would play his lyre, and relief would come to Saul. But the peace was temporary. War broke out again with the Philistines. The armies faced each other across the valley of Elah. From the Philistine camp came a champion Goliath of Gath, over 9 feet tall, wearing bronze armor weighing 125 pounds. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, with an iron point weighing 15 pounds. For 40 days, morning and evening, he came forward and took his stand, shouting challenges to Israel. "Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. David's brothers were in the army, and David had come to bring them food from their father. He heard Goliath's defiance and asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" When his words reached Saul, David was summoned. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," David declared. "Your servant will go and fight him." Saul objected David was only a young man, while Goliath had been a warrior from his youth. But David recounted killing both a lion and a bear while protecting his father's sheep. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul dressed David in his own tunic, coat of armor, and bronze helmet. David fastened the sword over the armor and tried walking around, but he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said. He took them off, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in hand, approached the Philistine. Goliath looked David over with contempt. "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods. "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David's response rang with faith. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's." As Goliath moved closer, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, he took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. David ran and stood over him, drew Goliath's own sword from its sheath, and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw their hero was dead, they turned and ran. The victory made David famous throughout Israel. Women came out from all the towns singing and dancing. "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." The refrain burned in Saul's ears. From that day on, jealousy consumed him. He tried to pin David to the wall with his spear twice. He sent David on dangerous military missions, hoping he would fall by Philistine hands. He gave his daughter Michal to David as a wife, hoping she would be a snare to him. But David succeeded in everything he did, because the Lord was with him. The pursuit began in earnest. David fled to the wilderness, gathering around him those who were in distress or in debt, or discontented, about 400 men. Saul hunted him relentlessly. Twice David had opportunity to kill Saul, once in a cave at En-Gedi when Saul entered to relieve himself, and once at night in Saul's camp when he and Abishai crept past sleeping guards. Both times David refused. "I will not lay my hand on the Lord's anointed." Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. Saul, desperate for guidance, consulted a medium at Endor, asking her to bring up Samuel's spirit. The figure that appeared delivered only judgment. "The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to David. Tomorrow you and your sons will be with me." The next day, the Philistines fought against Israel. The battle went badly. Saul's sons were killed: Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The archers overtook Saul and wounded him critically. "Draw your sword and run me through," he told his armor-bearer, "or these uncircumcised men will come and abuse me." But his armor-bearer refused, so Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him. The first king of Israel ended his reign in suicide on Mount Gilboa. David's lament over Saul and Jonathan became one of the most beautiful expressions of grief in literature. "Your glory, Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen." He commanded that it be taught to the people of Judah, preserving honor even for the man who had hunted him for years. David was 30 years old when he became king, first over Judah at Hebron, then over all Israel after years of civil war with Saul's remaining supporters. His first strategic move was brilliant. He captured Jerusalem, a Jebusite stronghold that belonged to no tribe, making it his capital. The city of David became the political and spiritual center of the United Kingdom. David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem with celebration and dancing. He wanted to build a temple for the Lord, but the prophet Nathan brought a different message. "You are not the one to build me a house to dwell in. Your son, who is your own flesh and blood, will build a house for my name. I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." The promise to David became the foundation of messianic hope. The descendant of David would rule forever. An eternal kingdom would come through his line. But David's own reign, for all its glory, was deeply flawed. His military victories were stunning. He defeated the Philistines, Moabites, Arameans, Edomites, and Ammonites, expanding Israel's territory to its greatest extent. Tribute flowed into Jerusalem from subject nations. Israel became a regional power, feared and respected, but at the height of his success came his greatest failure. One evening, David walked on the roof of his palace. From there he saw a woman bathing, very beautiful to look at. He sent someone to find out about her. The report came back. She is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam and wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah was one of David's elite warriors, currently away fighting the Ammonites. David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Then she went back home. Shortly after, she sent word to David, "I am pregnant." David's response revealed the corruption that power can bring. He recalled Uriah from the battlefield, hoping the soldier would sleep with his wife and thus provide cover for the pregnancy. But Uriah's integrity exceeded David's scheming. "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Even after David got him drunk, Uriah refused to go home. So David sent him back to the battle with sealed orders for Joab. "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." Joab obeyed. Uriah died in battle. After the time of mourning, David brought Bathsheba to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. Nathan the prophet came to David with a story about a rich man who had many sheep and cattle, and a poor man who had nothing except one little ewe lamb. When a traveller came to the rich man, instead of taking from his own flock, he took the poor man's lamb to prepare a meal for his guest. David burned with anger. "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die." Nathan's response was devastating. "You are the man." The prophet pronounced judgment. "The sword will never depart from your house. Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." David confessed. "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan replied, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die." The child became ill, and despite David's fasting and pleading, he died on the 7th day. David comforted Bathsheba, and she gave birth to another son, Solomon, whom the Lord loved. The prophecy of calamity from David's own household came true with terrible precision. His son Amnon raped his half-sister Tamar. Her full brother Absalom waited 2 years, then killed Amnon in revenge. Absalom fled and stayed away 3 years. When he returned, he began systematically stealing the hearts of Israel, positioning himself at the city gate to intercept people coming for justice, telling them, "If only I were appointed judge in the land. Then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." After 4 years of this subversion, Absalom declared himself king in Hebron. David, caught off guard, fled Jerusalem with his household and loyal followers. As he left, Shimei, a man from Saul's clan, pelted him with stones and cursed him. Get out, you murderer, you scoundrel! The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul." David's response showed the depth of his brokenness. "Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today." Absalom entered Jerusalem and, on the advice of Ahithophel, slept with David's concubines on the palace roof in sight of all Israel. The public humiliation fulfilled Nathan's prophecy exactly. But Absalom also received counsel from Hushai, David's friend, who had remained behind as a spy. When Hushai gave advice contrary to Ahithophel's brilliant strategy, Absalom followed Hushai's counsel. This gave David time to regroup. The battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. David's forces, led by Joab, defeated Absalom's army. David had commanded, "Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake." But Absalom's fate was sealed when his head caught in the thick branches of a large oak tree as he rode beneath it on his mule. The mule kept going, leaving him hanging between heaven and earth. Joab thrust 3 javelins into Absalom's heart while he was still alive in the oak tree, and 10 of Joab's armor-bearers surrounded Absalom and killed him. When David heard the news, his grief was raw and public. "Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you, O Absalom! My son, my son!" The cry of a father overwhelmed the relief of a king. Victory felt like ashes. David's final years saw more rebellion, plague, and political maneuvering over succession. As he lay dying, his son Adonijah attempted to seize the throne. But Nathan and Bathsheba moved quickly, reminding David of his oath that Solomon would succeed him. David ordered Solomon to be anointed immediately. The transfer of power happened while David still lived, ensuring stability. David's last words to Solomon mixed wisdom with scores to settle. "Observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands. Show kindness to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead. But deal with Joab according to your wisdom. Do not let his grey head go down to the grave in peace. And remember Shimei, son of Gera, do not consider him innocent." Solomon consolidated his power ruthlessly, executing Adonijah, Joab, and Shimei. Then he asked the Lord for wisdom to govern. His request pleased God, who granted him not only wisdom but also wealth and honor beyond any king before or after him. His wisdom became legendary. When 2 prostitutes came to him, both claiming the same baby, Solomon called for a sword. "Cut the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other." One woman agreed, but the other cried out, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby, don't kill him." Solomon knew immediately the one willing to give up the child to save its life was the true mother. Solomon's reign was Israel's golden age. He built the temple his father had been forbidden to build, a magnificent structure of stone, cedar, and gold. When the Ark of the Covenant was brought into the most holy place beneath the wings of the cherubim, the glory of the Lord filled the temple so powerfully that the priests could not perform their service. Solomon prayed a prayer of dedication that acknowledged the impossibility of containing God within walls. "The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this temple I have built." His wealth was staggering. 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, political alliances expressed in marriages. Gold came to him yearly 25 tons, not including revenues from merchants and traders and all the Arabian kings. His throne was overlaid with gold, with 6 steps and a footstool of gold, 12 lions standing on the steps. Nothing like it had ever been made for any kingdom. He built a fleet of trading ships that brought gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Kings from all over the world came to hear his wisdom. But the seeds of destruction were sown in prosperity. His foreign wives turned his heart after other gods. He built high places for their deities on the hills east of Jerusalem. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away. The prophet Ahijah met Jeroboam, one of Solomon's officials, and tore his new cloak into 12 pieces. "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord says. I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes." Solomon died. After 40 years of reign, and his son Rehoboam went to Shechem to be made king. Jeroboam and the people asked him to lighten the heavy yoke Solomon had placed on them. Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father. They advised kindness, but he rejected their counsel and listened instead to the young men he had grown up with. His answer was arrogant. "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." The rebellion was immediate. "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." The kingdom split. 10 northern tribes followed Jeroboam, taking the name Israel. Only Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to Rehoboam and the house of David in the south. Jeroboam's first act as king revealed spiritual disaster. Fearing that if people went to Jerusalem to sacrifice at the temple they would return their allegiance to Rehoboam, he made 2 golden calves. "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem," he told the people. "Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." He set one in Bethel, the other in Dan. This sin became the pattern every northern king after him did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. The northern kingdom lasted just over 200 years, through 19 kings and 9 dynasties. Not one king followed the Lord faithfully. Assassination, intrigue, and apostasy characterized the succession. The southern kingdom of Judah lasted over 300 years through 20 kings, all from David's line. Some were faithful, most were not. The prophets arose during this fractured kingdom period, speaking truth to power, warning of coming judgment, calling for repentance. Elijah emerged during the reign of Ahab, who married Jezebel, daughter of the king of Sidon, and served Baal and worshipped him. Ahab did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any king before him. Elijah appeared before Ahab with a declaration, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." Then he disappeared into the wilderness, where ravens brought him bread and meat morning and evening, and he drank from a brook. When the brook dried up, the Lord sent him to a widow at Zarephath. Her flour and oil lasted throughout the drought, a jar of flour that was not used up, and a jug of oil that did not run dry, exactly as Elijah had promised. 3 years into the drought, Elijah confronted Ahab again. "I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." This is one of your key dramatic moments, Elijah's showdown at Mount Carmel. The people assembled. The prophets of Baal came. Elijah stood alone and addressed the crowd. "How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people said nothing. Elijah proposed a test. "Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." The prophets of Baal went first. From morning till noon they called on Baal. "Baal, answer us." But there was no response. They danced around the altar they had made. At noon Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder! Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or travelling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." They shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response, No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah called to the people, "Come here to me." They came, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one for each tribe, and with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. He dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then came the twist. Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. They did so. Do it again. They did it again. Do it a 3rd time. They did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. Everything was saturated, an impossible situation for starting a fire. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah stepped forward. His prayer was simple and direct. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell, not a small flame requiring careful tending, but consuming fire. It burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and even licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God! The Lord, he is God!" Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. 850 false prophets died that day. Execution following demonstration. Then Elijah told Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." While Ahab went to eat, Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. He told his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant went and looked. There is nothing there. 7 times Elijah sent him. The 7th time, the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. The sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and a heavy rain came. The drought ended exactly as Elijah had prophesied. But Jezebel's response to the slaughter of her prophets was murderous rage. She sent a messenger to Elijah. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." Elijah, who had stood alone against hundreds, now ran for his life. He travelled a day's journey into the wilderness, sat down under a broom bush, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life." An angel woke him twice, providing bread and water. Strengthened by that food, he travelled 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. There he entered a cave. The word of the Lord came, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" His answer revealed his despair. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord told him to go out and stand on the mountain. A great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind came an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. The voice came again, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He repeated his complaint, but the Lord's response corrected his isolation. "I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal." Elijah was not alone. Faithfulness remained, hidden but real. Elijah's ministry continued. He called Elisha to succeed him. When his time on earth was ending, the two walked together from Gilgal. Elijah kept telling Elisha to stay behind, but Elisha refused. "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you." They came to the Jordan River. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water. The water divided, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. On the other side, Elijah asked, "What can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha's request was bold. "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Elijah replied, "You have asked a difficult thing, yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours." As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel!" He never saw Elijah again. He picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak and struck the water. "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The water divided, and Elisha crossed over. The prophetic mantle had passed, but neither prophetic warning nor occasional revival stopped the northern kingdom's slide toward judgment. The Assyrian Empire, the most brutal military machine the ancient world had known, rolled westward. In 722 BC, after a 3-year siege, Samaria fell. The Assyrians carried Israel into exile, scattering the 10 northern tribes across their empire. Foreign peoples were settled in Israel's land, mixing with the remnant and creating the Samaritans, a mixed people despised by pure-blooded Jews. The northern kingdom was gone. Only Judah remained, and Judah's clock was ticking. Judah watched the northern kingdom's destruction and learned nothing. The prophets continued their warnings. Isaiah saw visions of a coming servant who would suffer for his people's transgressions. Jeremiah wept over Jerusalem's stubborn refusal to repent, prophesying that the city would fall and the people would serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. Ezekiel, already in exile, saw the glory of the Lord depart from the temple, a theological catastrophe more devastating than any military defeat. King Josiah had brought revival, rediscovering the Book of the Law during temple repairs and leading the nation back to covenant faithfulness. But his reforms died with him. His sons and grandsons undid everything he had accomplished. They rebuilt the high places, reintroduced idols, and even sacrificed their own children in the fire to pagan gods. In Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar rose to power with ambitions of empire. In 605 BC, he marched into Judah and took the first wave of captives, including young nobles like Daniel and his friends. In 597 BC, after King Jehoiachin's rebellion, he returned and took a second wave, including the prophet Ezekiel and 10,000 skilled workers. He placed Zedekiah on the throne as a puppet king. Zedekiah proved faithless even to his foreign master. He rebelled against Babylon, seeking alliance with Egypt. Nebuchadnezzar's patience ended. In 588 BC, his armies surrounded Jerusalem for the final time. The siege lasted 2.5 years. Famine became so severe that women ate their own children. In 586 BC, the walls were breached. Zedekiah fled by night but was captured in the plains of Jericho. Nebuchadnezzar's judgment was cruel and symbolic. Zedekiah's sons were slaughtered before his eyes. Then his eyes were put out. The last thing he saw was his dynasty ending. He was bound in bronze shackles and taken to Babylon. The Babylonians systematically destroyed Jerusalem. They burned the temple, Solomon's magnificent structure that had stood for over 400 years. They broke down the walls. They burned every important building. They carried away the temple furnishings, the bronze pillars, the bronze sea, the gold and silver articles, everything of value. The city of David became a ruin. The people were marched into exile, leaving behind only the poorest to work the vineyards and fields. As they trudged eastward in chains, they must have wondered if this was the end. Had the Lord abandoned his people forever? Had the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob been revoked? By the rivers of Babylon, they sat and wept when they remembered Zion. Their captors demanded songs, but how could they sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Yet in Babylon's hanging gardens and royal courts, something unexpected happened. The exiles didn't just survive, some thrived, and through their faithfulness in captivity, they demonstrated that the Lord's presence wasn't confined to Jerusalem or the temple. He was with them even in a pagan empire. Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, whom the Babylonians renamed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were selected for special training in the royal court. They were to be taught the language and literature of the Babylonians, prepared for service to the king. But when the royal food and wine were provided, Daniel resolved not to defile himself. He asked permission to eat only vegetables and water. The official in charge was afraid. If you end up looking worse than the other young men your age, the king will have my head. But Daniel proposed a test. Give us vegetables and water for 10 days, then compare our appearance with the young men who eat the royal food. At the end of 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than all the others. God gave these 4 young men knowledge and understanding in all kinds of literature and learning. Daniel could also understand visions and dreams of all kinds. When their training ended, Nebuchadnezzar found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. In every matter of wisdom and understanding, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Exiles became advisors. Captives became counselors to the king who had destroyed their homeland. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that troubled him so much he couldn't sleep. He summoned his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers. "I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." But then came his impossible demand. "Tell me what my dream was, and interpret it for me," the wise men protested. "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans." Nebuchadnezzar flew into a violent rage and ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. The decree included Daniel and his friends. When Daniel learned of it, he went to the king and asked for time to interpret the dream. Then he returned home and told his friends. They prayed, asking God to reveal the mystery so they wouldn't be executed. That night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. He praised God. "Praise be to the name of God for ever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him." Daniel went to the king. No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Then Daniel described the dream Nebuchadnezzar had seen. A large statue, its head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. A rock was cut out, not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. The entire statue was broken to pieces and became like chaff, blown away without a trace. But the rock became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar listened, stunned. This was exactly what he had dreamed. Daniel continued with the interpretation. "You, your majesty, are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. But the feet were partly iron and partly clay, meaning this kingdom will be divided. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel. Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. He placed Daniel in a high position and made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon, and placed him in charge of all its wise men. But Nebuchadnezzar's acknowledgement was shallow. Soon after, he made an image of gold, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura. He summoned all the officials of the provinces to come for its dedication. A herald announced, "As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold. Whoever does not fall down and worship will, to immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." When the music played, everyone fell down and worshipped everyone except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Some astrologers came forward and denounced them to the king. "These men pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar was furious. He summoned the 3 men. "Is it true that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Their answer has echoed through history as a declaration of absolute faith. "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Notice the structure of their faith. First, confidence God is able to deliver. Second, hope he will deliver. But third, and most profoundly, commitment, regardless of outcome. Even if he does not, we will not worship your gods. This is faith stripped to its essence, trust without guarantee, obedience without conditions. Nebuchadnezzar's fury knew no bounds. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. The strongest soldiers in his army were commanded to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. The 3 men, still wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the furnace. This is one of your key dramatic moments walking through the 7 times heated furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The 3 men fell into the blazing furnace, still bound. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement. "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" His advisers confirmed it. "Look," he said, "I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the furnace. "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here." They walked out of the fire. The satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisers crowded around them. The fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Nebuchadnezzar declared, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. He issued a decree that anyone who spoke against their God would be cut to pieces. For no other god can save in this way. Years passed. Nebuchadnezzar had another dream, a great tree reaching to the sky, visible to the ends of the earth, providing food and shelter for all creatures. Then a messenger from heaven commanded, "Cut down the tree, but let the stump remain, bound with iron and bronze. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven and live with the animals. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him." Daniel interpreted the dream with reluctance. "My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies. You are the tree. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. 7 times will pass by for you, until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms and gives them to anyone he wishes." 12 months later, as Nebuchadnezzar walked on the roof of his royal palace, he boasted, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" Before the words left his mouth, judgment fell. A voice from heaven declared, "Your royal authority has been taken from you." Immediately, madness struck him. He was driven from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. At the end of 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes toward heaven, and his sanity was restored. "I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?'" The great king who had destroyed Jerusalem learned through humiliation what he had never learned through power, that heaven rules. Nebuchadnezzar's grandson Belshazzar threw a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles. In his drunkenness, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that he and his guests might drink from them. As they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand. The king's face turned pale, his legs gave way, and his knees knocked together. He called for the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple, and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and will be made the 3rd highest ruler in the kingdom." But none of the wise men could read the writing, or tell the king what it meant. The Queen Mother remembered Daniel. "There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means." Daniel was brought before the king. Belshazzar offered him rewards, but Daniel declined them. "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means." First came rebuke. "You knew all this, Belshazzar, yet you have not humbled yourself. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles drank from them while praising gods of silver and gold. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways." Then the interpretation. This is what these words mean. Men, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain. Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. The prophecy came true with the speed of hours. Babylon fell, and a new empire arose. Under Persian rule, Daniel continued to prosper. Darius appointed him as one of 3 administrators over the entire kingdom, and Daniel so distinguished himself that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. The other administrators and satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel, but they could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy. They devised a trap. They went as a group to the king. "May King Darius live forever." All the royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors agree that the king should issue an edict that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Darius, flattered, signed it into law. When Daniel learned of the decree, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. The conspirators found him praying and brought it to the king's attention. Darius was distressed. He worked until sundown trying to find a way to rescue Daniel, but the law was irrevocable. Daniel was brought and thrown into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was placed over the mouth of the den, sealed with the king's signet ring. Darius spent the night without eating, without entertainment, unable to sleep. At the first light of dawn, he hurried to the den and called in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel's voice came from the den. "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed. Daniel was lifted from the den, and no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. Before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Darius wrote to all nations, "I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, his dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." The 70 years of exile prophesied by Jeremiah were ending. Cyrus, king of Persia, issued a proclamation allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of his people among you may go up, and may the Lord their God be with them." Nearly 50,000 returned in the first wave under Zerubbabel. They rebuilt the altar and began offering sacrifices, even while the temple foundation was still being laid. When the foundation was completed, the priests in their vestments and the Levites with cymbals took their positions to praise the Lord. They sang responsively, "He is good. His love toward Israel endures forever." All the people gave a great shout of praise because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple. The sound of weeping mixed with the sound of joy. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping, because the people made so much noise. The past and future met in that moment, grief for what was lost, hope for what would be built. Opposition arose immediately. The enemies of Judah and Benjamin offered to help build, but when refused, they discouraged the people and bribed officials to work against them. For 16 years, construction stopped. Then the prophets Haggai and Zechariah arose, urging the people to resume the work. Despite continued opposition, they persevered. 20 years after the first exiles returned, the temple was completed. It was not Solomon's temple. The glory was less, the size was smaller, but it stood a house of God in Jerusalem once again. They dedicated it with joy, sacrificing 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 male lambs, and 12 male goats as a sin offering for all Israel. They celebrated the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days with joy, for the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria, so that he assisted them in the work on the house of God. Decades later, Ezra the priest and scribe arrived with another wave of returnees, bringing the law of Moses and leading spiritual renewal. Then came Nehemiah, cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, who heard that Jerusalem's wall still lay in ruins. He wept, fasted, and prayed, then asked the king for permission to rebuild. Artaxerxes granted his request. Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem and surveyed the walls at night. The devastation was total. He rallied the people. "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. Opposition came immediately from Sanballat and Tobiah. They mocked the Jews. "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble burned as they are?" Tobiah added, "What they are building, even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones." But Nehemiah prayed and posted guards. The builders wore their swords while they worked. Each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. Half the men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. The trumpet was kept nearby to sound the alarm if an attack came. The wall was completed in 52 days. When all their enemies heard about this and all the surrounding nations saw it, they lost their self-confidence, because they realized that this work had been done with the help of God. Jerusalem was a fortified city again, but the story was not complete. 400 years of apparent silence were about to begin, centuries when no prophetic voice would speak, when no inspired scripture would be written, when the heavens seemed closed. Yet during these silent centuries, the stage was being set for the greatest intervention in human history. The silence was not empty. During those 4 centuries, empires rose and fell with the rhythm of tides. Persia gave way to Greece when Alexander the Great swept across the known world with unprecedented speed. By age 30, he had conquered from Greece to India, spreading Hellenistic culture and the Greek language everywhere his armies marched. When he died of fever at 32, his empire fractured among his generals. The land of Judea became a prize fought over by the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Syria. Greek culture crashed into Jewish tradition like waves against a seawall. Some Jews embraced Hellenization, adopting Greek names, Greek customs, even Greek gods. Others resisted with increasing desperation, clinging to the law of Moses as their identity marker in a world trying to erase distinctiveness. The crisis came to a head under Antiochus IV Epiphanes, a Seleucid king who decided to eliminate Judaism entirely. He outlawed circumcision, Sabbath observance, and possession of Torah scrolls, all punishable by death. He erected an altar to Zeus in the Jerusalem temple and sacrificed pigs on it, the ultimate defilement. Jews who resisted were tortured and killed. Mothers who circumcised their babies were paraded through the streets, with their infants hung around their necks, then thrown from the city walls. In the village of Modien, an elderly priest named Mattathias refused to offer sacrifice to the Greek gods. When another Jew stepped forward to comply, Mattathias killed him at the altar, along with the king's official enforcing the decree. "Let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come out with me," he cried. He and his 5 sons fled to the hills, beginning a guerrilla war against impossible odds. Mattathias died within a year, but his son Judah took leadership. They called him Maccabeus the Hammer for the way he struck the Seleucid forces. With a small band of fighters using hit-and-run tactics, knowledge of the terrain, and absolute conviction, Judah defeated army after army sent against him. Against professional soldiers he fielded farmers and shepherds. Against cavalry and elephants he used narrow passes and surprise attacks. And he won. In 164 BC, 3 years after the temple's defilement, Judah recaptured Jerusalem. When they entered the temple, they found the sanctuary desolate, the altar desecrated, the gates burned, and weeds growing in the courts. They cleansed it, built a new altar, and rededicated the temple. According to tradition, they found only one sealed jar of pure oil for the menorah, enough for 1 day. But miraculously, it burned for 8 days until new oil could be prepared. This became Hanukkah, the festival of lights, celebrating not just military victory but spiritual rededication. The Maccabean revolt succeeded beyond imagination. For the first time since the Babylonian exile, Judea was independent. The Hasmonean dynasty, descendants of the Maccabees, ruled for a century, but independence bred corruption. The Hasmonean kings became as Hellenized as those they had fought, adopting Greek names and Greek ways. They claimed both kingship and high priesthood, a combination the law never authorized. Civil war erupted between rival claimants to the throne. Into this chaos came Rome. Pompey the Great marched into Jerusalem in 63 BC, conquering Judea without much resistance. The brief taste of freedom was over. Rome's iron legions now controlled the land of promise. The Jews went from Persian rule to Greek rule to Roman rule, each, the transition bringing new forms of oppression, new cultural pressures, new reasons to hope for divine intervention. Rome installed puppet kings, the most successful being Herod the Great. Part Idumean, part Jewish, wholly ambitious, Herod was a builder and a monster in equal measure. He expanded the temple beyond anything since Solomon, creating a structure of stunning beauty with massive stones, some weighing hundreds of tons. He built theatres, amphitheatres, palaces, and entire cities. Caesarea Maritima, his crowning architectural achievement, had a harbour that rivaled any in the empire, but his paranoia was legendary. He murdered his favourite wife Mariamne when he suspected her of infidelity. He killed her mother, her brother, and eventually 3 of his own sons when he feared they were plotting against him. Caesar Augustus reportedly said it was safer to be Herod's pig than his son, a dark joke referencing that Herod, nominally Jewish, wouldn't eat pork but had no qualms about killing family. It was in this context, Roman occupation, Herodian brutality, religious corruption, messianic expectation at fever pitch, that the story begins again. Not with armies or political maneuvering, but with an old priest named Zechariah burning incense in the temple. An angel appeared to him. Zechariah was terrified. The angel spoke, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah questioned, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years." The angel's response was pointed. "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Zechariah came out of the temple unable to speak. Elizabeth conceived, just as promised. 6 months later, Gabriel appeared again, this time to a virgin named Mary in Nazareth, a town so insignificant it's never mentioned in the Old Testament. "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled. The angel continued, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." Mary's question was practical. "How will this be, since I am a virgin?" Gabriel explained. "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God." Unlike Zechariah, Mary believed, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." Caesar Augustus issued a decree for a census, requiring everyone to register in their ancestral hometown. Joseph, being of David's line, travelled from Nazareth to Bethlehem with Mary, now heavily pregnant. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them. Think about this image. The King of Kings, born in a stable, laid in a feeding trough. The Creator of the universe entering his creation as a helpless infant. The Word through whom all things were made, now crying, hungry, needing his mother's milk. Heaven touching earth in the most unexpected way imaginable. Nearby, shepherds were watching their flocks at flock. Night. An angel appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. They were terrified. "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David a Saviour has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God. "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favour rests." When the angels left, the shepherds hurried to Bethlehem and found Mary and Joseph, and the baby lying in the manger. After they had seen him, they spread the word, and all who heard it were amazed. Far to the east, magi, wise men, astrologers, scholars of celestial signs saw an unusual star. They travelled to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Herod was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. He called the chief priests and teachers of the law. "Where is the Messiah to be born?" They answered from the prophet Micah, "In Bethlehem in Judea." Herod sent the Magi to Bethlehem with instructions to report back. They followed the star until it stopped over the place where the child was. They entered the house, saw the child with his mother Mary, and bowed down and worshipped him. They opened their treasures, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, gifts for a king, a priest, and one destined for burial. But warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they went home by another route. An angel appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up, take the child and his mother, and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." That same night, Joseph took the family and fled. When Herod realized the Magi had outwitted him, his rage was furious. He gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity, who were 2 years old and under. Soldiers went from house to house, ripping infants from their mothers' arms, slaughtering toddlers in the streets. A sound was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted. After Herod's death, the family returned from Egypt and settled in Nazareth. The child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was on him. One story from his childhood survives. At age 12, he went with his parents to Jerusalem for Passover. On the return journey, Mary and Joseph traveled a full day before realizing Jesus wasn't with their group. They hurried back to Jerusalem and searched for 3 days. They found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. Mary scolded him. "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." His answer hinted at something profound. "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" They didn't understand. He returned to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. Silence again. The narrative jumps forward 18 years. John, the son of Zechariah and Elizabeth, appeared in the wilderness of Judea, wearing clothes of camel's hair with a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. His message was stark. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. He was the voice crying in the wilderness, making straight the way for the Lord, exactly as Isaiah had prophesied. People from Jerusalem and all Judea and the whole region of the Jordan went out to him. Confessing their sins, they were baptized by him in the Jordan River. When Pharisees and Sadducees came to watch, John's words were cutting. "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the Rameh? Coming wrath. Produce fruit in keeping with repentance. The axe is already at the root of the trees, and every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire." Then Jesus came from Galilee to be baptized. John tried to prevent him. "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" Jesus replied, "Let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness." As Jesus came up from the water, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. A voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Immediately, the Spirit sent Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. For 40 days he fasted, eating nothing. At the end, he was hungry. The tempter came with 3 tests. "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." The devil took him to the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands." Jesus answered, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Finally, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "All this I will give you if you will bow down and worship me," Jesus declared. "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." The devil left him, and angels came and attended him. When John was put in prison, Jesus began his public ministry in Galilee. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. On the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. He unrolled it and found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." He rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." At first they spoke well of him and were amazed. But then they asked, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in his hometown." Their initial wonder turned to fury. They drove him out of town and took him to the brow of the hill to throw him off the cliff. But he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. He called disciples Simon, Peter, and his brother Andrew, fishermen casting nets. "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. James and John, sons of Zebedee, were mending their nets with their father when Jesus called them. They left their father and followed. Matthew, a tax collector, despised collaborator with Rome, was sitting at his tax booth when Jesus said, "Follow me." He got up and followed. The miracles began. At a wedding in Cana, when the wine ran out, Jesus turned water into wine, 6 stone jars, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. The master of the banquet tasted it and exclaimed that the host had saved the best wine for last. This was the first of his signs, revealing his glory. He healed the sick lepers made clean with a touch, paralytics who walked after years of being bedridden, a man born blind who received sight, a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years and was healed by touching his cloak. He cast out demons who recognized him and shrieked his identity. He calmed storms with a word, walked on water while his disciples were terrified in their boat, and fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, with 12 baskets of fragments left over. His teaching was unlike anything the people had heard. "You have heard it said, but I tell you." He claimed authority to reinterpret the law of Moses. He spoke of the kingdom of God in parables, stories about seeds and soils, wheat and weeds, hidden treasure and precious pearls, fishing nets that caught all kinds of fish. The crowds were amazed because he taught as one who had authority, not as their teachers of the law. But opposition grew. The religious leaders watched him with increasing hostility. He healed on the Sabbath, violating their interpretation of rest. He ate with tax collectors and sinners, defiling himself by their standards. He touched the unclean, making himself ceremonially impure. He claimed to forgive sins, which only God could do. He called God his Father, making himself equal with God. The confrontations escalated. In the temple courts, he made a whip out of cords and drove out those buying and selling. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. "Get these out of here! Stop turning my Father's house into a market." The authorities demanded, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?" Jesus answered, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." They scoffed the temple had taken 46 years to build, but he was speaking of the temple of his body. His teaching became increasingly provocative. "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." The Jews grumbled because he said, "I am the bread that came down from heaven." He continued, "Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you." Many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. Jesus asked the 12, "You do not want to leave too, do you?" Peter answered, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." 3 years of ministry. Thousands healed. Demons cast out. The dead raised Jairus' daughter, the widow's son at Nain, and most dramatically, Lazarus, who had been in the tomb 4 days and whose body was already decaying. When Jesus called, "Lazarus, come out!" the dead man walked out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen, his face covered with a cloth. The chief priests and Pharisees called a meeting. "What are we accomplishing? Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." Caiaphas the high priest spoke. "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." From that day on, they plotted to take his life. Jesus entered Jerusalem for the final time riding on a donkey, exactly as the prophet Zechariah had foretold. Crowds spread their cloaks on the road. Others cut branches from the trees and spread them. Those who went ahead and those who followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. The whole city was stirred, asking, "Who is this?" The crowds answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." In the upper room, at his final meal with the disciples, Jesus took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them. "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." He took the cup. "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." Then he told them, "One of you will betray me." They were deeply distressed and began to say one after another, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Jesus answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me." Judas, who would betray him, asked, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi?" Jesus replied, "You have said so." After supper, they went to the Garden of Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives. Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch." He went a little farther and fell to the ground, praying, "Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." He returned to find them sleeping. This happened 3 times, Jesus praying in agony so intense that his sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground, the disciples unable to stay awake. While he was still speaking, Judas arrived with a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and elders. Judas had arranged a signal. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." He went straight to Jesus. "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said, "Do what you came for, friend." The men seized Jesus. Peter drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Jesus said, "Put your sword back in its place. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?" He touched the man's ear and healed him. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. They took Jesus to Caiaphas the high priest. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. Finally, 2 came forward with a twisted version of his words about the temple. The high priest stood up. "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" Jesus remained silent. The high priest said, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus replied, "You have said so. But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses?" "What do you think?" They answered, "He is worthy of death." Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him. Outside, Peter sat in the courtyard. A servant girl saw him. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee." He denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about." He went to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him. "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath. "I don't know the man." A little later, those standing there approached Peter. "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately, a rooster crowed. Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." He went outside and wept bitterly. At dawn, they bound Jesus and took him to Pilate, the Roman governor. The Jewish leaders couldn't execute anyone themselves, that power belonged to Rome. Pilate asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "You have said so." The chief priests accused him of many things, but Jesus made no reply. Pilate was amazed. Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" Pilate could find no basis for a charge. He tried to release Jesus, offering the crowd a choice: release Jesus or Barabbas, a notorious prisoner. The chief priests and elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" Pilate asked. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do, then, with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" They shouted. "Crucify him!" Pilate asked. "Why? What crime has he committed?" But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" Pilate had Jesus flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a purple robe on him, went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him in the face. Pilate brought him out. "Here is the man," he said. When the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate tried once more, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. They made him carry his own cross to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, along with two criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross: "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." The chief priest protested, but Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." The soldiers divided his clothes among them and cast lots for his garment. People passing by hurled insults, shaking their heads. "He saved others, but he can't save himself." One of the criminals hurled insults at him, but the other rebuked him. "We are punished justly, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With a loud cry he gave up his spirit. At that moment the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split. The centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened. They were terrified. Surely he was the Son of God. Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy disciple, asked for Jesus' body. Pilate gave permission. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance and went away. The chief priests and Pharisees went to Pilate. We remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, "After 3 days I will rise again. Give the order for the tomb to be made secure." Pilate agreed. They made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting guards. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. The stone had been removed from the entrance. She ran to tell Peter and John, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Peter and John ran to the tomb. John outran Peter and reached it first, but didn't go in. Peter arrived and went inside. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head, folded up by itself, separate from the linen. Then John also went in. He saw and believed. Mary stood outside the tomb crying. She bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been. "Woman, why are you crying?" they asked. "They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him." She turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize it was Jesus. "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said. "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. That evening, the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. Jesus came and stood among them. "Peace be with you." He showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed. Thomas was not with them. When the others told him, "We have seen the Lord," he declared, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, Jesus came again. He said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Over 40 days, Jesus appeared to the disciples many times, speaking about the kingdom of God. He appeared to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, walking with them, explaining how all the scriptures pointed to him. He appeared to 500 believers at once. He appeared to James, then to all the apostles. He ate fish with them to prove he wasn't a ghost. He commissioned them. "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." He led them out to the vicinity of Bethany. He lifted up his hands and blessed them. While he was blessing them, he left them and was taken up into heaven. A cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. "Men of Galilee, why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus, who has been taken from you into heaven, will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven." They returned to Jerusalem with great joy and stayed continually at the temple, praising God. They gathered in an upper room and devoted themselves to prayer. About 120 believers met together. Peter stood up. "Brothers and sisters, the scripture had to be fulfilled. Judas, who served as guide for those who arrested Jesus, was one of our number. Judas had bought a field with his blood money and had fallen headlong, his body bursting open." Peter continued, "We must choose one of the men who have been with us the whole time to become a witness with us of his resurrection." They proposed 2 men and prayed, "Lord, you know everyone's heart. Show us which of these 2 you have chosen." They cast lots, and the lot fell to Matthias. He was added to the 11 apostles. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. This is one of your key dramatic moments, Pentecost's rushing wind and fire. Suddenly a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit enabled them. Jerusalem was crowded with Jews from every nation under heaven for the festival. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each one heard their own language being spoken. "Aren't all these who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our native language? Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues." Amazed and perplexed, they asked, "What does this mean?" Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice, and addressed the crowd. "Fellow Jews, and all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. These people are not drunk, as you suppose. It's only 9 in the morning. No, this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. He proclaimed Jesus, his life, death, and resurrection. God has raised this Jesus to life, and we are all witnesses of it. Therefore, let all Israel be assured of this. God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Messiah. When the people heard this, they were cut to the heart. Brothers, what shall we do? Peter replied, Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need.